Good morning, Congresswoman Schultz. I'm so delighted to have you with us today. I know that you've been busy. I know that you have a lot going on. And let me personally say thank you for the work that you are doing and all of you are doing in Washington to make things better for us, even in this very tumultuous time dealing with the pandemic. So I just want you to know I am truly grateful for you. And I want to just kind of go through a conversation about some of the things that we have seen taking place over the course of the pandemic. So I have some questions that I've tried to work through. So I want to make sure I stick to this so that I'm very specific in what I'm asking, okay?
Absolutely.
So we know that a series of aid packages passed the House of Representatives, which augmented our unemployment compensation system and provided funds for small businesses. Can you give me some insight or some kind of overview as it relates to that legislation?
Absolutely. And good morning, Pastor Davidson, and to the very special New Mount Olive congregation. I certainly wish, as you all do, that we could be together in person. It is always such a joy to be able to worship with you on Sunday morning. Such a special and engaging family atmosphere in your church, and so I miss you all, and look forward to when we can get together again. This is such a difficult time, and Pastor, you are and continue to be the beacon of light, and in a very difficult and stressful time. And you know, it's all the times that I have worshiped with you and seen the reverence and respect that your congregants have for you, the way they honored you recently for your anniversary, all of those things, all of the weaving together of the binds of relationships in your congregation are for times like this, are for times when we are enduring together. Usually, each Sunday you'll talk to your congregants, and there are individuals who will hear your message more acutely because they themselves are going through a stressful time and others may not be. Every single one of us right now is dealing with incredible stress and tension, some greater than others, but the opportunity to be together and to hear the message of hope and unity and love, which are in sparse supply right now, is just so important. So thank you, and thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you.
So I'm glad to have the opportunity to share some of the ways that we're trying to help everyone, and I am sort of sticking to a script now also because I want to make sure I get the details right. But this is an unfolding health crisis, and we have made so many efforts now to soften and ease the impacts of this public health crisis. I mean, the COVID-19 pandemic is a once-in-a-century event that has dramatically changed our lives in only a few weeks. It is a tragedy on a massive scale that's had a disproportionate impact on communities of color and other marginalized groups that face systemic inequality before this crisis. And by the way, when we talk about the systemic inequality, in normal times, this is what we mean when we say there are disproportionate impacts on communities of color as a result. And so the reason it's so important that we address the systemic inequalities is so that when we have really serious stressors on our public health system, on our economy, that everyone who has to endure these crises endures them in relatively the same way. And unfortunately, that's not the case with this. So it's critical that we ensure that all Americans are educated about this virus, about the resources available to respond to it. And so far, Congress has passed 4 pieces of legislation, and each one included substantial provisions to help workers and to increase our healthcare capacity. On March 27th, the largest stimulus package in American history, the CARES Act, was enacted into law. It is a $2 trillion emergency injection into the economy, and it reinforces our response to the ongoing public health emergency. The CARES Act provided crucial help to our workers and families, most notably by securing an additional 13 weeks of unemployment benefits to assist those who remain unemployed after state unemployment benefits run out. The CARES Act also created pandemic unemployment assistance, which is an additional $600 per week to each eligible recipient effective until July 31st, 2020. Unfortunately, since unemployment insurance is a partnership that is federally supported but state managed, implementation of the federal unemployment expansion is dependent on Florida's processing system, which is extremely flawed and inadequate. And I'm sure I'm getting a lot of amens right now, even though I can't hear them, because we've heard from thousands of constituents who are struggling to get access to that unemployment system. The status quo is clearly unacceptable, and my congressional colleagues and I will continue to push the state and the governor to fix and reform what is a dysfunctional system. Among the changes that are needed, Florida should extend the time that individuals can receive state unemployment benefits, and they must raise the maximum benefit amount from $275, which is one of the stingiest caps in the nation. Our friends and our family and neighbors shouldn't face added hardships because of this dysfunctional system, and state governmental leadership must make fixing the unemployment compensation system its highest priority. Now, a little over a week ago, the House passed an emergency aid stopgap measure while we negotiate our next more robust package. It was a $484 billion stopgap bill that funds crucial needs, including an additional $310 billion for the Paycheck Protection Program. That is a forgivable loan program that is meant for small businesses that maintain their employment and wage levels. And as you may have heard, there were problems with these PPP loans and which companies were able to secure assistance. So in this package, we made sure to prioritize America's truly small businesses, including minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. And we did that by setting aside $60 billion of that 310 for community-based lenders like small and medium-sized banks, credit unions, community development financial institutions, which are what we call CDFIs, like PayPal, for example. These lenders all have a track record of lending to underserved markets. We're also expanding small business support beyond the PPP by securing $60 billion in additional funds for the Economic Injury, Disaster Loan, and Grant programs. This enables the Small Business Administration to offer qualified firms emergency cash advances of up to $10,000, which are grants, as well as low-interest loans worth up to $2 million that are repayable over 30 years. And that cash advance of $10,000, of up to $10,000, doesn't have to be paid back. And finally, the bill requires the White House to develop a national strategic testing policy and provides $25 billion to increase our testing capabilities. Testing is key to reopening our economy and resuming our lives. And that funding can be used for manufacturing and distributing tests, which we clearly don't have enough of yet, and conducting contact tracing to make sure that we can find the people that someone who has been infected and test them so that we can have a self-isolation system once we reopen. As part of its mandate, the federal government must issue reports on testing, diagnoses, hospitalizations, and deaths that will include data on the race, ethnicity, and geographic characteristics of those affected by the virus. Unfortunately, we Democrats had to fight for the hospital and testing funding, and the administration still refused inexplicably to provide any assistance for state and local governments. Local government workers are on the front lines of this crisis, and these are vital civil servants and first responders who keep our communities up and running, and all of us safe. We pressed to make sure that the president would agree to address this critical priority in CARES 2.0, and I'm really glad that we were able to make sure that we required the reporting of the statistics that I mentioned, because when we go back and conduct oversight over the expenditure of these funds and the impact of this public health crisis on different communities, we're going to have the data to be able to really see where it hit the hardest and make decisions about how we spend money going forward on fighting future pandemics. So I'll work closely with all of my colleagues to make sure that we continue to fight to meet your needs in the next phase of the CARES Act.
Okay, thank you, Congresswoman. You mentioned something that was intriguing, the financial assistance, and there's a lot of talk about, the rebate checks and how does someone qualify for a check? How much can they expect to receive when it will arrive?
Absolutely, that's a question we're getting a lot, and there's a little bit of confusion over those checks. Okay. The CARES Act provides recovery rebates to individuals below certain income thresholds. If you're a single person making less than $75,000 a year, you will receive a rebate of $1,200. If you're a married couple, making less than $150,000 a year, you will receive a rebate of $2,400. You can also claim $500 per dependent child. And this is true even for those who have no income, as well as those whose income comes entirely from non-taxable means-tested benefit programs like SSI benefits. For individuals who make more than $75,000, the rebate begins to decrease by 5% of whatever you make above $75,000. So at an income of $99,000, the rebate disappears and you're not eligible. For joint filers who make more than $150,000, your rebate will decrease by 5% of whatever excess you make above $150,000, and at an income of $198,000, the rebate disappears. For the vast, as in you're not eligible for it. For the vast majority of Americans, no action on your part will be required in order to receive a rebate check. The IRS will use your 2019 tax return if you filed one yet, or in the alternative, your 2018 return, and the payment will be deposited directly into the same banking account used for your tax refund. If the IRS does not have your direct deposit information, please visit the IRS online at irs.gov and click Get My Payment. From there, you can check the status of your payment, and if you have not filed your 2019 tax return, you can submit your banking information. If you have already filed your 2019 tax return and they don't have your direct deposit information on hand, then you will get a paper check in the mail. So that's the information we have about that.
Okay, well, I have one thing I want to ask you that
Sure.
I think is important, because explaining that was significant, but do people have to pay back the money they receive?
No. No matter what people are saying on social media, you are not required to pay back this stimulus rebate payment. You also don't have to pay taxes on your stimulus payment. So don't let anybody tell you that this rebate payment that I just described has to be paid back, or that you have to pay taxes on it. It is simply a rebate, and it's designed to make sure that we can help people have a little bit of a tighter safety net underneath them during this crisis.
Okay, I certainly appreciate you clearing that up.
course.
Let me ask you this question. Thousands of Americans are sick, or they're caring for like a sick family member. Many of them have jobs where they don't get vacation or sick leave. What's being done for them in the case if they miss work to care for themselves or a loved one?
This is a really important question, because there are a lot of employers that aren't aware of this new provision that we passed as part of the Families First Act. And so they're not necessarily telling their employees that they're eligible for it. So the Families First Act was the second relief bill package that we passed to address the coronavirus crisis. And it expands access to emergency paid sick leave to as many as 87 million US workers. Many of these workers currently have no paid leave and were being forced to choose between their paycheck and their health and the health of the people around them. Full-time employees are now entitled to 2 weeks paid, or 80 hours, of fully paid time off to receive treatment for COVID-19, or to self-quarantine, or to seek a diagnosis. And you are also entitled to 2 weeks, 80 hours paid time off at 2/3 of your regular pay, up to $200 per day, to care for a family member or to care for a child whose school has closed, or if your child care provider is unavailable due to COVID-19. If you're a part-time employee, you're entitled to fully paid time off, up to $511 per day, for the typical number of hours that you work in a typical 2-week period. Full-time and part-time employees are also entitled to 12 weeks of job-protected leave to care for children in the event of school or child care provider closures, and that is also paid.
Well, let me say this. In hearing all that you said, first of all, let me thank you for joining us, but also thank you for being so specific, because this is a lot of information to try to grasp, and having congregants who are asking me questions on a consistent basis. I'm very delighted to have this information from you, but also thank you so much for being such a personable leader that we, as your constituents in this community, we know that if we need something from you, we can call on you and your staff. They are phenomenal, and I say that sincerely. Thank you so much for for lending yourself to us in so many ways and being so approachable and always being available to us. We mean that sincerely. So thank you so much. And I appreciate you joining us today.
Well, you're so welcome. Thank you, Pastor Davidson, for including me as always, and for the New Mountain Olive family for always welcoming me with your warm embrace. I want to just conclude where I usually conclude since this crisis has began, and that is to please continue to heed public health guidance on washing your hands, staying home to the maximum extent possible. We are not out of the woods here in South Florida or really anywhere. I'm concerned that the governor has begun to reopen the rest of the state too soon. We have not had 14 days of decline yet in this state, which is part of the guidelines. And so we need to be looking out for one another by looking out for ourselves. And so wearing a mask in public and making sure that you keep that social distance is absolutely critical. And lastly, I just want everyone to know that I'm here. We are here. My whole team, we've recorded this interview, so feel free to play it back so that you can, or if you need it, we can certainly send it to you. But call my office anytime you need assistance. My office staff is teleworking, and so they're home, but we're picking up the messages every day. They're calling people back. My phone number for the district office is 954-845-1179. And you can also, go online to my website, which is wassermanschultz.house.gov. But Google me, and that's the first thing that comes up. And we are here to help you with any federal issue that you're having trouble with. And just stay safe and healthy, everyone.
Okay, again, thank you so much, and all the best to you and your family.
Thank you as well. Take care.
Okay.